ॐ यो देव सवितास्माकं धियो धर्मादिगोचराः प्रेरयेत्तस्य यद्भर्गः तद्वरेण्यम् उपास्महे।
अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। ॐ वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। We are in the third chapter, verse number 36. The last class we finished with the verse, the very important verse. Better is to do one's own imperfectly performed dharma than the well-performed dharma of another person. Even death in doing one's own dharma is better. The dharma of another is fraught with fear. The fear of taking one off track and the fear of one getting into the pattern of attracting and proliferating negative karma which leads to hell, etc. So this is what we saw. And there was a big explanation on why one's own dharma is better, why another person's dharma is better, why another person's dharma is bad, and why even though one is not good in one's own dharma, one should put an effort to perfect one's own dharma rather than trying to do somebody else's dharma which may appear easy for oneself. Like this. So we had a lot of analogy on that. So then Arjuna is asking, Atha kena prayukto ayam papam charati purushah anichannapi Varshneya baladiva niyojitaha. Krishna, impelled by what does a person commit a mistake? As though pushed by some force, even though not desiring to do so. Papam charati purusha. Papam means that which produces sorrow, dukkha, that which produces pain and sorrow in the long run for one. Why does a person do it? The person, even sometimes, a person does not desire to do it. There are people who don't want to do some things, but as though somebody is pushing from inside. It's like a king commanding a servant, as though like a king is commanding a servant and how the servant does. See, this is only a simile. It is as though like a king commanding a servant, the person does. Like somebody is from dwelling inside is pushing a person to do. Like that, why a person does an action which is obviously creating trouble for the person and the person knows that, still is not able to resist doing it. As an example, I gave the example of one statement, very famous statement of a character in Mahabharata called Duryodhana, the negative character in the epic. He says, I know dharma, but I am not able to do. I know adharma, but I am not able to desist from indulging in adharma. It is as though somebody is sitting in my heart and pushing me to do the wrong thing. He says this. So we discussed this also a few verses back in the last class. We discussed this. Now he is asking Krishna, impelled by what? Why is he asking this question? For example, in the beginning of the third chapter, and sometimes in the second chapter, it was dealt with in a very detailed, not in a detailed manner, in a brief manner, how desire leads to anger, anger clouds the memory, memory clouds the ability to discern the right thing, clouding the knowledge, and then a person is destroyed, means taken off track. This we saw in the, long back we saw in the third chapter. For example, this one, Sangat Sanjayate Kamaha, Kamat Krodah Vijayate, Krodat Buddhina, Krodat Smriti Vibramaha, Smriti Vibramaha Buddhinasha. The sequence we saw. How step by step a person is taken away from the ability to pursue Purushartha. A person's knowledge gets clouded out. It was dealt with, but wanting a more elaborate explanation, because this is a very intriguing phenomena that we see. Most people know what to do. At least regarding common sense issues, most of us know what to do. But in a moment of desire or in a moment of anger, something clouds our judgment and we are pushed to do the wrong thing. Some cases we realize very quickly, but then we cannot desist ourselves, we cannot stop ourselves from doing it. It is like one is dragged into it in spite of knowing this is not okay. But in the case of ignorant people, they are pulled into it by desire or whatever. They don't realize that it is wrong. But after some time, when the negative result of dukkha, of the pain or the sorrow caused by the adharma comes, because every adharma produces trouble, it's a troublemaker. Only when a person is doing actions according to dharma, it does not bring trouble in the long run. So when you do actions according to adharma, it will always bring trouble in the long run, even though it may look pleasurable in the short term. So when a person is pulled into it, later they regret. Oh, I am pushed into this mode of struggle. I am forced to do these things, and I am suffering and I am struggling because of the power of my desire. So the people regret later. But the people who know, they regret even while they are doing it. They are doing it and still regretting and doing it in the same time. Helplessness. Helplessness with respect to desiring, helplessness with respect to anger, even though recognizing that it is not okay. This is a very strange phenomenon. How does it happen? And how this pattern is so strong in most people? So Arjuna is asking Krishna. Now, the Lord is saying, Bhagavan Uvacha Kama Eshat Krodha Eshat Rajo Guna Samudbhavaha Mahashano Mahapatma Vidyenam Iha Vairinam. The desire, this anger, born of the quality called Rajas, is a glutton and a great sinner. Know that to be the enemy here in this world. This is the explanation. This is the answer. He starts his answer. Now the teaching is beginning. To answer this question, slowly the topic is being developed. So we will see what the Lord is saying. Here there is an important point. The anger is born of Rajoguna. It's a glutton, samudbhavaha. Mahashano Mahapapma. Mahashano Mahapapma. Two words are used. And anger and desire. Desire and anger are born of Rajoguna. Rajoguna is the middle one, the red color, passion, desire, etc. Prakriti has three gunas, if you remember. Nature has three qualities, three modalities. Sattva, knowledge, awareness, serenity, equilibrium. All this comes under sattva. Passion, desire, anger, egoism, strong likes and dislikes and preferences. All these come under rajas. Indolence, ignorance, laziness, blindness created by the lack of purity, mala, the kind of a blindness, covering up created by impurity, heaviness, inertia, all these things belong to the quality called tamas. So all these three qualities are required to run the show of this universe. A person desiring one's own welfare, a person desiring happiness must gradually increase the sattva, must choose more and more. Increasing the sattva means habituating the mind to come back to sattva more and more across all occasions, across all situations. So when the tamas is more, one goes into a kind of pain and suffering and depression and all those things. When rajas is too much, when the rajas is misplaced rajas, that is coming out of rajas, he's saying it is driven by prakriti. So the 2 points, kama yesha, krodha yesha, rajoguna samudbhavaha, means this movement of desire, the pulse, the movement of desire, the movement of anger, that tendency is created by rajoguna. That means I am not the one who is desiring, I am not the one who is angry. Kamaha karoti naham karomi. Manyu karoti naham karomi. Desire did it, I did not do it. Anger did it, I did not do it. This is one prayer we do once in a year. 1008 times we have to repeat this. Yesterday, Kama Kama is Swaha. We say this one prayer is there. Kamo Karushin Manyu Karushin Namo Namaha. Here in this prayer we remember this understanding. Desire did what is not to be done, and this is not to wash one's hands. It's not to wash one's hands from the responsibility, not being irresponsible. It's not about that. It is about objectifying the anger, objectifying the desire. When we say desire and anger are born from rajoguna, which means it is a certain mechanism. So when you understand that desire and anger are certain mechanisms, you are ready to deal with it. That means you are objective about the desire and anger. Suppose if you don't deal with the desire and anger as a mechanism, then you will think you are the one who is unstable. I am unstable is something. The mind is unstable is something else. So, first he says, Kama and Krodha come from Rajoguna. That means now we are trying to understand the mechanism of desire. We are already objectified the phenomena. Now, this Kama Krodha, which is born of Rajoguna, Mahashano means like a glutton, is like whatever you give is not satisfied. Mahashano Mahapapma, Kamaha Mahashana, Krodha Mahapapma. Like this you can map it. That is, the glutton is the desire is the glutton, anger is the great sinner. Why anger is the great sinner? Previously in the Shankaracharya commentary we saw that anger is a great sinner because it is, and also it is very dangerous because it makes even a person do a harm against one's own teacher. The discussion comes in the previous verse when this concept is dealt with. He says a person can get wild at one's own teacher also. That means one of the unthinkable behavior in the Vedic culture to show the wrath, to show your bad mood and throwing a tantrum at a teacher, at your own teacher, is something unthinkable of. The person would not do when the person is in the senses. Even in the worst situation, the person will not throw an angry statement or show the temper to the teacher, usually. This according to the culture. Now, even one is forced to sin against one's own teacher means what? To that extent, the discrimination is clouded. That is why anger is considered as Mahapapma, the great sinner. Desire is considered as Mahashana. Mahashana means the one who is never satisfied. The more you give, the more that person desires. It's like there is a joke. One monk went for begging. So he was having a skull vessel to receive the food. Skull bowl, human skull bowl. There are a section of sadhus called kapalika, so they go around with a skull in their hand. So he was begging food, and he asked the king, please, he said, what do you want? I am doing some big ritual for the welfare of the world. Can you donate some money? So king said, okay, I'll give you some gold coins. Then, how much you want? See, this skull, if the skull is full, that's enough. He showed the skull. The king started putting the gold. Went on and went on. How much ever he put, it's not getting full at all. And then the whole coffers of the kingdom got over. He said, this is something funny. And then he said, what is this? Are you doing some magic or something? And he said, no. This is the skull of a greedy man. A man who died with desire. And a greedy person, whatever you give is never satisfying. That is the point. So because this sadhu came to teach the king a lesson. This king wanted more and more, He was taxing the people more. He wanted to conquer more kingdoms like this Alexander. He wanted to go and conquer the whole world. Never it's enough. All the time more and more and more. More pleasures, more power, more wealth, This is the pattern of desire. The desire is something, it does not think. Desire is a force. Born of Rajoguna means it is not having any knowledge. It is only a mechanical force. The more I add energy into that, the more the force comes with an extra vigor the next time. Every time you satisfy a desire with an intention to enjoy that object of desire, when you satisfy a desire, you are reinforcing the pattern of desire. So the next time the desire comes with extra force. So the more you give to the desire, the more the desire asks. The law of diminishing marginal utility. There is one thing in economics I heard. It seems you eat one bread today, you are satisfied. Tomorrow you eat two breads, maybe. As the time goes, you need more breads to get the same level of satisfaction. It is something like this. And also, that is the amount of satisfaction you derive from the same object, in the same amount of that object of desire goes down over a period of time. The amount of value the object has for you goes down over a period of time. Why? Because desire is unsatiable. It wants stronger and stronger and stronger. You want, long back we had a 486. It's a computer PC called 486. When I was in college, it's a big deal to have a 486. There was 386 and then it came 486. It became and then came Pentium 1. And everybody was so excited. Pentium 1 is so fast. Now it is the dual core i5, core i3, core i7, still the speed is not enough. Then you see the internet of 56 kbps. And now the internet is going in 2 gbps, 3 gbps, still it is not enough. They are going for 3G, 4G. Now in Korea they have introduced 5G. Because the mind wants more and more and more sensation. Faster video games, faster pictures. HD is not enough, Ultra HD. How to get the Ultra HD in my little phone? And then they will go for more. Then I don't want any HD. When I look at the air, mid-air, the picture should come. The movie should come. They are working for that. So, see, look at the consumerism in the world. The more and more you put, the more it asks. So, it is called as a glutton. Glutton is a person. You keep on giving, the person will keep on eating. You can never satisfy the person. That insatiable desire to consume, consumerist mind. That is why consumerist style of living does not work. You will see. So he says the Kamaha is a greedy person. He is like a never satisfied glutton. Krodha is a sinner. Why it is a sinner? It clouds your understanding and pushes you to do all the wrong things, which is harmful for the society and harmful for oneself. So because of this, know these two to be the enemy in this world. Desire and anger are the enemy in this world. They are born from Rajoguna. Why is the enemy of the world? Okay, we will see. Dhume navriyate vahnir yatha darsho malena cha yatol benavrito garbhas tatha tenedam avritam. Just as the fire is covered by the clouds of smoke, just as a mirror is covered by dust, and just as a embryo, a fetus, is covered by womb, by the uterus, so also knowledge is covered by the binding desire. Here is in the bracket, Puja Swamiji has written binding. Knowledge is covered by desire. Here, actually given why it is a problem. Not why, because just like a mirror is covered by dust, knowledge is covered by desire. Why knowledge is covered by desire is a problem. Why knowledge should not be covered? Why should we be all the time thinking? Should it be all the time from the head? Why can't we live from the heart? Yes. Please live from your heart. You are all the time too much head, too much knowledge. You should give space to the heart. And Einstein said, never let your head, never allow your head to interfere with your heart. So all this we hear. So now this is to be understood in a proper sense. Here what he says is, it does not mean be a emotionally dead person. It does not mean that. It means to understand why desire and anger can cause trouble. How desire and anger act as an enemy. How the desire and anger becomes one's enemy, because it clouds your knowledge. If the desire and anger does not cloud the knowledge, if it is working in accordance with knowledge, because in one place in Bhagavad Gita the Lord says, I am the desire in the living beings, I am the desire that is not opposed to Dharma. It comes later. I am the desire in the living beings, that is the desire that is not opposed to Dharma is Ishvara. So desire as such is not a problem. The problem is being driven by desire. Okay. To be able to operate a desire is something that is a very enlightened quality that comes only out of a very high level of sattva, a high level of purity in the intellect, and a high level of tapasya and chitta shuddhi. When you have the sattva shuddhi, when you have the purity of your intellect, mind, and your sense of ego structure, your ego structure must be purified. When the ego structure is made according to the knowledge, when the ego structure is constructed based on knowledge, every minute the asmita, I and mine, are purely functional. For a person whose I and mine are purely functional, directed by knowledge, the pattern of desire will not be a binding one. There is no pattern. So, only what is useful according to Dharma arises in the person as a desire. So when that's called Dharma Mega Samadhi, there is a word in Patanjali Yoga Sutra that says Dharma Mega Samadhi. A person who is a highly purified yogi, when he has complete viveka, very high level of viveka and vairagya towards everything, the mind goes into a certain mode called Dharma Mega Samadhi, where the person, once in a while, whenever the person is active, that activity comes as a result of Dharma. The mind is in tune with the totality. That is the desire that is not opposed to Dharma. Also, when we train our thinking, according to the approach of Shruti Yukti Anubhava, when we train our thinking according to the scripture directed reasoning, and the scripture and reasoning directed analysis and understanding of experience, scripture directed reasoning, knowledge of the scripture with Shraddha, knowledge of the scripture directing your reasoning, the reasoning that is within the guidance of the scripture, that is conducted by the guidance of the scripture, and the reasoning which is guided by the scripture is analyzing the everyday experiences and understanding one's experiences in the light of the reasoning guided by scripture. Such a mind, such a life when lives like that for a long time, and a person lives like that for a long time, this level of purity comes. So, the mind is available for dharma, the kama and krodha, the desire and anger come down, and the mind starts coming more and more to dharma. At that time, one may have a desire. So, that will be a very selfless, a very objective desire for the welfare of all. So, that kind of a desire which has for its motive common welfare, that is a dharmic desire. So, a dharmic desire is not what is talked about here. A desire that is centered on Rajoguna. So, when do you know that a desire is centered on Rajoguna? When the object of desire has a strong element of pleasure, obtaining pleasure or avoiding pain. Likes and dislikes centered on me as the experiencer. When a desire is centered on me as an individual, wherever the desire is strengthening and contributing to the I as an enjoyer, the individuality, when the desire is centered on a strong pattern of individuality, then that is a binding desire. That is coming from Rajoguna. So, such a desire is a covering on knowledge, because when the person is caught in the desire, there is no space in the mind to objectively analyze whether something is relevant or not. One only wants that. If you see people, with highly result-oriented mind, and these go-getters, achievers, they come for, they have this urgency to get things, urgency to achieve some targets. When a person is very highly motivated to achieve a target, that person cannot think. They will always look for shortcut. How about this? How about that? Calculating mind. All the time it will be calculated. It will not stop to see, is it relevant? Am I going on the right direction? What is the fundamental thinking will be gone. In corporate language, they talk about 3 kinds of intelligence. Covering of the knowledge can be understood like this. Knowledge, generally what they talk is these 3 kinds of intelligence they talk about. IQ, EQ and SQ. You heard about it? You heard about IQ, I'm sure. All of you know about IQ, intelligent quotients. How fast you solve a problem and all that. Then EQ. How much importance I give to the human element, I give to the emotional element. While solving a problem, am I taking care that nobody is hurt? Am I taking care that people are satisfied? How much I am satisfied? These kind of things. And how much collateral damage I am minimizing in the process of getting my result. This kind of thinking, where you give importance to the human factor, is emotional quotient, EQ. Now, there is something else they talk about called SQ, which is a recent topic that is emerging. SQ is called spiritual quotient. Spiritual quotient, I don't know why they call it spiritual quotient, but anyway, let us call it as Dharma quotient. This Dharma quotient is what sets the direction. They say this SQ is the most fundamental kind of intelligence that makes the EQ and the IQ relevant. So without SQ, the EQ and the IQ will not be relevant. SQ is that which tells you, which helps you to determine, am I doing the right thing? Am I the right person to do this? Is it the right time to do this? Is it better not to do this? So setting the direction, setting the coordinates and deriving meaning from an activity. When you do an activity, the sense of meaningfulness, the sense of relevance, the sense of being in the right direction, that comes from SQ. So that knowledge is the sense of Dharma, one's inherent sense of Dharma, being on the right track. That gets clouded by desire. You may, and a little more, it doesn't take much time to cloud your EQ. So only then the person becomes it becomes like a, you become like a Chinese government. You don't care about anything. As long as you get the results, as long as your GDP is growing, you don't care if the Yellow River is polluted, you don't care if the electronic dump is growing in one corner. More and more, you see these technology graduates who go and work for these consumerist companies. They such a beautiful minds, powerful minds, all the time creating more and more powerful technology to satisfy the craving mind of the people. Another guy is there. People are all satisfied. Then you have this advertising person whose job is to inject dissatisfaction in the society. It's like they said, like how they create fear. It seems I saw one video about this bottled water. In that video, it said tap water is okay. Then, if everybody is drinking tap water, how do I sell bottled water? I want to sell more and more bottled water. How to sell? Make them feel insecure about the tap water. And unless I have the bottled water, I am not safe. Create that feeling. Now they are saying bottled water is full of all kinds of 100, 200 kind of chemicals are there, which is all cancer causing and this problem, that one. But when they do this, why did they decide how a person can think as a normal, healthy, sane person? You will be wondering how such a highly educated postgraduate engineer or whatever, that person, such a scientific mind, how that person can think and systematically plan so that they can fill up only their pocket at the expense of environment, at the expense of the society, at the expense of children, at the expense of the nature and the climate, and at the expense of the human consciousness. How a person can think like that with so much of education? That means IQ is very powerful. It's like a carnivorous animal, It's very clever, like a hyena. Hyena is very clever in hunting. Like that, there are people with phenomenal IQ. He is not talking about IQ here, but he may say. But you see, all the bad guys are, they are very smart. A pickpocket is very smart. Desire. It is the desire that has made him so smart. It is the power of his craving that has made that person achieve so much. Point is not achieve. Has he achieved the right thing? That's what Krishna is talking about here. Desire covers the knowledge like the dust covering the mirror. Which knowledge? The knowledge of Dharma, the knowledge of what is right and what is wrong, the knowledge of what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, the knowledge of what is Shreyas and what is not Shreyas. Shreyas means that which is good for me and everybody in the long run. That is Shreyas. The knowledge of Shreyas gets clouded. That is what we will talk about. We are not talking about this high performance intelligence which is result oriented. We are talking about a high spiritual intelligence which sets the right direction. Okay? That is the knowledge that gets covered by a mind that is driven by desire and anger. Then, avratam jnanametena jnanino nityavairina kamarupena kaunteya dushpurenala dushpurenam analenacha, like the fire. Knowledge is covered by this insatisfiable fire of desire, the constant enemy of the wise, Kaunteya. Jnanino nityavairina. Why it is a constant enemy of the wise? Why he says the constant enemy of the wise? Because a wise person, even though the knowledge is there, may be driven by habitual desire. Like a coffee, for example. A coffee is not to be drunk in empty stomach. But a person who has been drinking regularly coffee all life, even though comes to know that coffee is bad for health, the system asks for coffee. Some days you can be without coffee, some days you are forced to have the coffee. And you feel, okay, let me have. Then you think, why should I have the coffee? I should not have the coffee. Instead of this, I could have had some porridge or something. But why I don't have, why the system is asking for coffee? Because of the habituation. So a person with knowledge recognizes that a desire is operating now. The mind is running behind this object because of desire. And he knows this is not good. It is not healthy. It does not lead anywhere to anything that is of value either for oneself or for others in the long run. Still, why the mind is running? So he sees because of the desire. So this desire is considered as an enemy because he knows that this is not to be done. Still the system wants to do it. There is a force that is driving to do it. The person may do or may not do. If the person does not do, desire creates some kind of restlessness inside. If the person does, it brings trouble. So, for a wise person, here means a person who is objective enough to recognize that I am right now under the grip of desire. I am right now under the grip of anger. When a person recognizes that, he treats the desire and anger as an enemy because it is against the knowledge, in the sense it does not allow the knowledge to operate. It hijacks the system from the knowledge. When you want to do japa, and exactly when you are doing japa, the mind will remember everything around. All the stuff that you forgot to do, the homework that you forgot to do in school will come when you are doing japa now. You know, that means what? No, I'm talking about when you are middle-aged. What you did in school 20 years before, that will come exactly at the time of japa. And it will come with such a big force of, oh my God, I did not do it. Or it will remember something that you have to do tomorrow or day after. The whole agenda will come. You will like an Excel file in front of you. What is next, you know, or the whole planning mind will be doing only when you do japa. You will finish the japa and then go and sit in the table in front of your computer to plan, nothing will come. Mind will remember the mantra. So this is the pattern. Why? That is why desire is considered as an enemy. Desire is like a virus that is hijacking your CPU and does not have enough, the computer is hanging all the time. A wise person knows this. He wants the mind to be available for the knowledge, but the mind is hijacked by the resources of the body, the resources of the prana, the resources of the mind, the knowledge, information, everything is hijacked. The memory cortex, everything is hijacked by this desire, and the system is not available for knowledge. Because of that, the desire is considered as an enemy, always considered as an enemy by the wise. That is why Buddha said desire is the root cause of all evil. Because he saw the problem of desire in his own mind. He sees that as an enemy. It is the root cause of all problem. It's not a teaching. It is a recognition. It is a recognition that desire, that is binding. Rajoguna born desire is an eternal enemy of the person who understands that right now the desire is operating. And who is able to understand the presence of desire, the one who is able to recognize that the desire is taking over my system when the desire is taking over. For such a person, it is an all-time enemy. But what about the people who don't know, the ignorant people? There are people who have no clue that they are actually under the effect of desire. There are some people who will make decisions impelled by desire. Okay, they will do something impelled by desire. But when you ask them, do you know that you are doing something wrong? They say, no, it's not wrong, it is right. How do you say it is wrong? I want like this. What's wrong in this? No? The whole logic will work according to the desire. So they may not even realize that the mind is hijacked by the desire. These are the ignorant people who are completely under the sway of the desire. Even they will regret later when the result of the desire-driven mind does some action. It brings negative results. Over a period of time, it will bring some negative results. Then that time they will recognize it is because of desire that we are suffering. We are forced to do action. We are forced to struggle in this samsara. It is because of desire. Even they recognize later, even though they may not recognize at the time when the desire is operating, like how the wise is operating. So for the wise, it is the enemy all the time. And desire is considered as desire is seen as the enemy even by the unwise from time to time. Kama rupena kaunteya dushpurena nanalena cha. This dushpurena analena cha. Dushpurena analena cha means the fire that cannot be quenched. The more and more you put, the more it is it is consuming. The more you put, the more it consumes. Shankaracharya says in one of the texts that satisfying a desire is like pouring ghee into the fire. More and more fuel you add to the fire only becomes more. You think, okay, the fire is asking for fuel. I put some fuel, it will be satisfied. No. It is like a fire that consumes fuel. It's becoming bigger and bigger. Now, how this desire operates, it's all fine. We understood the power of desire that is born of Rajoguna. The desire driven by ignorance, that's what it means. A desire that is purely driven by habituation. That is Rajoguna born desire. Okay. Desire purely driven by the power of habituation. And when that desire is stopped, when the desire is not allowed to fructify, when I am very deeply engaged in pursuing my desire, somebody puts a brake. Something puts a brake. I am not able to achieve my object of desire. It gets blocked. Then what happens? For frustration, anger. So, impeded desire becomes anger. So, every anger has behind it an impeded desire. Every time you find yourself angry, all you need to do is to just drink a glass of water and see what is the desire behind this anger. Why am I angry? Because I want something and that I am not getting. Get stopped. So, what am I wanting? What am I wanting so much that I get angry when it is stopped? That means the desire is binding. See, when a desire is not binding, if it is stopped, one will not get angry. One may get slightly disappointed. Oh, it would be nice. Okay, that is fine. But means the desire is binding. Only a binding desire can create anger. So whenever we find ourselves angry, let us inquire and trace the anger back to a desire that was impeded, so that it causes anger. So we get back to the desire and let us analyze the desire and see how I can free myself from that pattern of desire. That is a clue here. So now, how it works, this desire pattern, born of Rajoguna, that which causes trouble, the eternal enemy of the wise, this desire, which is the root of all the trouble in this world, how does it work? How it operates? Where is it located? You say, no, in the heart. All the desires are in the heart. As though there is somebody sitting inside and pushing me to do things. Where is this person sitting inside? You show me the person, I will handle that fellow. Where is it sitting? So Krishna is saying, Indriyani mano buddhirasyadhi ishtana muchyate. Indriyani mano buddhirasyadhishtana muchyate. Indriyani mano buddhir asya adhishtana muchyate. Etair vimohayatyesha jnanam avritya dehinam. Etair vimohayatyesha jnanam avritya dehinam. Dehinam, the person who is living in this body. Dehi means the person who lives in the body. For the person, this desire deludes that person by covering the knowledge, covering the wisdom. This desire, where is it located? Adhishtanam means the place where it is located. What is Shankaracharya's Adhishtanam? Shankaracharya's Adhishtanam is there in 4 places in India. Where is Vedic Dharma Adhishtanam? Vedic Dharma Adhishtanam is this street Brazoyamo. So Adhishtanam means the point where it is located. Adhishtanam. Also, it means the locus. No, Adhishtanam is also used in one more sense. In Mithya, when we say the stool, the scound, has for its Adhishtanam the wood. That is in a little different manner. It is like it is based on wood. It is centered on wood. Its location is on wood. That means wood is the place where the scound is. Now, this is slightly different. Here, when you talk about Mithya and Satya, you say Satya as the Adhishtanam of Mithya. That which provides the space for something to exist in it. It is not fundamentally different, but we have to understand here it is more like in space. It is more like that which is located on something can be separate from it or need not be separate from it. For example, the pot that is located on the clay. The adhishtanam for the pot is clay, but the pot is not separate from clay. Adhishtana ananyate mithya. There is a definition we saw. Adhishtana, that mithya is something that is not separate from its adhishtanam. Here means the desire is located in the senses, mind and the intellect. I mean, it is a pattern that is dependent upon the senses, mind and the intellect. Its location is in the senses, mind and the intellect. These faculties are that which is operating the desire, that which is sustaining the desire. The desire is sustained by the patterns of activity in the sense faculties, by the patterns of activity in the mind, and by the patterns of thinking in the buddhi. That is what it is. So, the adhishtanam for the desire, the location for the desire is senses, mind and intellect, the thinking faculty. The mind means the cortex of information, all these memory and likes and dislikes and patterns and tendencies, all that is put as mind, manas. And Indriyani. Indriyani means the five sense faculties. Why sense faculties? Sense faculties are governed by nervous system, and it has a certain force within themselves. Indriyani means Karmendriya, Jnanendriya. There are two kinds of sense faculties. The organs of action, organs of perception. Okay, the organs of action and organs of perception, all the 10 sense faculties are being talked about here. Once an organ of action is continuously engaged in a certain activity, that is considered pleasurable. Even after doing it and satisfying and leaving it, when you are engaged in some other work, the same organ of action will come up with a tendency to do that activity for the sake of pleasure. It is like eating chocolate. Now, okay. Let us be like this. Let us say some handicrafts. There are people who are called workaholics. This workaholic, what do they do? Because we are talking about organ of action. A workaholic derives a certain pleasure by completely immersing oneself in doing certain set of activities, whatever the person is good at. Now, that action gives the person a certain kind of high. For example, we have there are these compulsive sports people. There are people who are compulsive runners. They have to run long distance every day. When they don't, the people who do asanas, the people who do very heavy hatha yoga and heavy athletics, see, they derive a certain pleasure out of that. If they do that activity, in that activity, the mind derives a certain kind of a pleasure. So, even when you are sitting quietly, when when you have to do something else, there is always this craving, and there is an urge in the system to run away and do that activity. It will want you to get out of that place and go and do that thing to feel good. That force, that inherent force can be there in the sense faculties also. It's because of habituation. Now, Indriyani, Manas, Buddhi means one above the other. The sense faculties are dependent on the mind. The mind is dependent on the intellect. So, a certain pattern of activity of the mind sustains the certain pattern of activity of the sense faculties. This mind and the sense faculties are sustained by a certain attitude and thinking. So, unless we handle in all these three levels, to handle a desire, we have to handle it at the level of the sense faculty, at the level of the mind, at the level of the buddhi. That is why only cognitively renouncing and being in the middle of all the objects that tempt your sense faculties will not work. When a person wants to overcome the desire, a pattern of desire, when you want to overcome a desire, we have to create conditions whereby the desire is not encouraged in the respective sense organ, it is not encouraged in the respective thought patterns in the mind, and it is not encouraged with the attitude that supports it. Only when we do in all these three levels, a desire can be overcome. Simply by controlling and thinking about it, it will not work. Similarly, only by handling your thinking and not taking the appropriate control measures at the level of action, not taking the appropriate control measures, but only thinking about controlling and working with the attitude alone also will not work. Working with the attitude but continuously providing all the sensations for the sense faculties will not work. I have renounced in my mind. That is nonsense. That will not work. So we have to understand all these three. Desire has for it Adhisthana, Indriya, Manas and Buddhi. Indriya means organs of action. Organs of perception. Organs of perception means smell, taste, sight, touch and hearing. So when I am constantly feeding myself, my mind, enjoyment through the five sense faculties of perception, and the more and more I provide this sensory input, the mind will look for the sensory input. Unless I cut the sensory input, I will not have a context to work with the thinking. If I am not having a context to look at the mind that is looking for it, no? When I deprive myself, let us say, I want to stop eating chocolates. I am addicted to chocolates, let us say. So I don't want to eat chocolate anymore. So what do? I stop providing chocolate for myself. When I don't have chocolate, mind is looking for chocolate. Now this is the desire centered in the mind. Really nice to have a chocolate. The thinking, oh, it would be nice to have a chocolate, imagining that is mind, manas. Now behind that is an attitude. How this desire is sustained by the buddhi? This chocolate gives me pleasure. This experience of the sensation of eating the chocolate makes me complete. It gives me something. That is the attitude. The idea that I am somehow better when I have that object of enjoyment. In the moment of enjoyment, something is better with me. That means investing your sense of self in a particular experiencer. A particular experiencer given a lot of importance, and through that you define yourself. That self-definition through a particular experience is a certain pattern of thinking in the buddhi. So that has to be challenged. Do I get anything from this pleasure? Is it important for me? You ask somebody, you speak of somebody on the road. Is it important for you that every day or once in a week your partner brings you a bunch of flowers? It's very important. Every day in America, in every day morning and night, you have to say I love you. If you don't say I love you, that means they think they don't love each other. That becomes very important. Now, a certain set of things are very, very important, and when that is taken away, not only the mind is looking for it, but you feel horrible without it. You don't feel okay about yourself. And your self-definition comes from that. When I don't have such and such a thing in a such and such a manner, I am not okay. I don't feel good about myself. That is the attitude in the buddhi. So that has to be challenged. Plus the thought patterns have to be taken care. Maybe the manas aspect can be taken care by doing japa, pranayama, etc. The indriyas also can be, that rush you feel can be controlled by pranayama. That wavering of the mind and hovering of the mind around the object can be taken care by meditation, and the buddhi, the wrong thinking, can be corrected by proper study, swadhyaya. With all these three, we can handle. So this provides a fantastic clue that a desire pattern has to be handled in all the three levels: sense faculties, mind, and buddhi, the thinking faculty. Therefore, तस्मात् त्वम् इंद्रियान् यादौ नियम्य भरतर्षभ पाप्मानं प्रजहि ह्येनं ज्ञानविज्ञाननाशनम्. तस्मात् त्वम् इंद्रियान् यादौ नियम्य भरतर्षभ पाप्मानं प्रजहि ह्येनं Jnana Vijnana Nashanam. Therefore, Arjuna, the foremost in the clan of Bharata, that is, here is Bharata Shobha, means he is reminding, it's a motivation. Oh, the one who is the greatest in your lineage, you Arjuna, who is the greatest in the lineage of Bharata, may you, controlling the senses at the outset, destroy indeed this sinner, destroy this sinner, the desire. Who is the destroyer of the knowledge and wisdom? Who is the sinner? The desire is the sinner. You are not the sinner. It's very, very important. It's called teaching. If I say you are the sinner, then you need a savior. If you are not the sinner, you don't need to be saved. You must know how to save yourself from the sinner, which is the desire pattern. So you have something to handle. You have a methodology. So Arjuna, the great in the clan of Bharata, you are the great person who is in your lineage. May you overcome this sinner called desire. The one you learn how to destroy this. May you desire to destroy this pattern, binding desire. Who is the destroyer of knowledge? Indriyani
Indriyani paranyahur Indriyebhyah param manah Manasastu para buddhiryo buddhehe paratastu saha. They say that the sense organs are superior to the body. The mind is superior to the sense organ. The intellect is superior to the mind. Whereas the one who is superior to the intellect is he, the self. That means you. Okay. And evam buddhehe param buddhva evam buddhehe param buddhva samstavyatmanam atmana jahi shatrum mahabaho kama rupam durasadam. Knowing that, Arjuna, knowing that which is superior to the intellect in this way, now he is showing the way, how to overcome desire. Knowing that which is superior to the intellect, which is the self, one's own true nature, Swarupa, Atma. Knowing one's own self, which is the superior to the intellect, having made the mind steady with the buddhi. Evam buddhehe param buddhva samstadhyatmanam atmana. Stabilizing the self in the self. Literal meaning. Okay, literal meaning is stabilizing the self, establishing the self in the self. Here the translation is having the mind steady with the buddhi, destroy the enemy. The one self is the mind, the self that is seeking everything. Okay. Stabilizing the self by the self means which self has to be stabilized? The unsteady self has to be stabilized. I say no, I feel very unstable. I think I should become a little stable. When you say that, who is unstable? Who is stable? A certain habitual pattern in your mind, which you say as you, for the sake of referring, we say the unstable pattern in the mind is I am very unstable. Let me stabilize myself. I feel disturbed. Let me feel okay first. So there is one who wants to make the unstable you okay. So there are two yous here. It's a very practical approach. Practically, I see that I am unstable. I should make myself stable. So what is that unstable me? The unstable me is the manas. What is that stable me? What is that me who can stabilize this unstable me? Is the buddhi. The knowledge recognizes the presence of instability in the mind. So, using your faculty of knowledge and decision making, the buddhi, using your thinking that directs your activity, may you stabilize the unstable mind. Stabilizing the self by the self does not mean leaving the mind and abiding in the absolute self. No, somebody will translate that. That doesn't mean it. It means the unstable self is stabilized by the self that is devoted to knowledge, which is the mind is stabilized by the buddhi. Stabilizing the mind by the buddhi, destroy the enemy that is in the form of binding desire, that which is so difficult to understand. Jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasanam. Kamarupam durasanam. This great enemy who is of the form of binding desire. This great enemy who is of the form of desire born of Rajoguna, that enemy who is very difficult to understand. Why it is very difficult to understand? Because you never know why it is working in a certain way. It's just pushing itself towards its object. And it is very difficult to understand because sometimes it looks very relevant, sometimes it looks irrelevant. So it is, you don't know whether to, whether it makes sense or something. It looks like it makes so much sense. We say, no, intuitively I felt that I should do it. Intuitively feeling that you should do it is like, then later you say, but it was so clear that I should do it. If it is only a desire, Rajoguna born desire, how did I feel it so much? Sometimes you will see this, when people become spiritual, newly they will become spiritual. This happens. You start doing japa, you start doing some pranayama, some practice. Then you will start seeing synchronicity. When you are going to dig your own hole, when you are going to dig your own pit, you will see fantastic synchronicity. Everything in the universe will give you signs that this is the right, this is what you should do. You feel very strongly that you should do something. And when you have a very strong desire, empowered by certain special practices and all that, the strong mind, it can give you projections. It will show you signs that, you should do this, you should do that. Then suddenly all those people who are in this world, who are connected with satisfying this desire, they will appear out of nowhere. It's called Sankalpa Siddhi. When you have a Sankalpa, when you have a desire, it can manifest very fast. Who are very spiritual and who are also wise, they are very, very careful how they think. What they think. They will take care that they don't desire unnecessary things, they don't encourage a desire, and they will make sure that they don't feel harbor any ill will towards anybody and all that. Because the mind, the more the mind gets powerful, the more it becomes capable of manifesting a desire. And then what will happen? You will see signs, everything around you will see some synchronicity. Exactly that person who is there to destroy your life will appear from nowhere, and everything will confirm that you must choose that person. Because it is exactly matching your desire pattern. You will end up with a synchronicity and bump into that person who perfectly fits your desire pattern. Exactly in the wrong time when you should not be there. But because of the synchronicity, you will think that it is destiny. A desire can appear as destiny. And the real destiny can get clouded by the power of desire. So this desire is a great enemy who is very difficult to understand. Why? Because this enemy comes as a friend. If the enemy comes as an enemy, hey man, I'm going to kill you, then you can fight. But he says, I'm going to save you. I will give you food, I will give you clothing, I will give you shelter, I will build a place of worship for you. I am here to serve you. We are here to take care of all the poor and the needy. And they'll come like this, coming like a friend. Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa comes like a friend of humanity. That's how she comes to India. Bharat Ratna. She's given an award. You come like a friend, she will take care. Then she will take you to the, you are in the road rotting. She will take you from the road, give you medicine, it's very nice. One fine morning, you have a very incurable disease. Some problem is there. I will give you medicine, I will take care of you. The Lord has told us to love everybody. But you should become a Christian. After that, I will give you. And when the person is having a highly infectious disease, they will pray for the person. We are praying for him. There is another hospital just few streets away, which is, but it belongs to another NGO, which has enough beds to take care of. There are empty beds. They will not refer the patients to another hospital. They will have a 300 bed hospital. They will have 900 patients. Because the extra 600 patients are souls. You cannot get rid of these souls. You need more and more souls for the club. So they will have all these people and they will act as though they are helping them. While the real help would have been done in some other way. So desire is like this. Desire comes like Mother Teresa. It is coming to save you. Desire comes like that. But what it is doing, it is only giving you trouble. It clouds your understanding. It puts you in the wrong pattern of thinking. It puts you into doing stuff that is more harmful for you in the long run. All in a guise that it is all very good for you. You should see how they market Viagra. It is Viagra, how it is marketed. A 70-year-old man in the grip of desire is marketing Viagra. Fantastic. While the Viagra is working, he is very happy. Then in 2 days, he has some stroke. Because too much of blood flow and too much of heart rate, something, and then the fellow gets into some problem. Then he's in hospital. What happened? What did you take? Then he gives his the doctor traces back. Then he said, he take Viagra. 10 cases he sees. All the 10 cases, out of the 10 cases, 8 cases have taken Viagra. Then they do some research in the Viagra. Then they say, it is very bad for the heart. If you have a heart problem, you should not take. Then the Viagra guy who is selling Viagra has a trouble. Then he gives some money, and then they say, it is not safe to take without prescription. So a desire is something that makes things more and more complex and so confusing that what is absolutely destructive for a person appears like an angel. It is a devil in the guise of an angel. That is what it is. That is why it is difficult to understand, because it comes like a friend while actually it is an enemy. That is why he said, destroy this desire which is born of Rajoguna, which is an enemy, very difficult to understand. And then the third chapter is getting over. इति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासूपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे कृष्णार्जुनसंवादे कर्मयोगो नाम तृतीयोऽध्यायः. This is the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is titled as Karma Yoga. Now, we will go a little bit into the commentary of Sri Shankaracharya, how he finishes the third chapter. He will always have some point which is striking right at the fulcrum of the understanding. How the knowledge is obstructed. There are a few important points here. Desire is centered in the sense faculties, mind and buddhi. And why the desire is the enemy? Because it obstructs your knowledge. And how to overcome that? By knowing the true nature of yourself, which is higher than the intellect. Okay. Sense faculties are higher than the body, because they are the ones who direct the body to do activities. The mind is higher than the senses. If the mind is controlled, the sense faculties follow suit. When it is Pratyahara is being explained by Sri Patanjali in Yoga Sutra, he says, when the prana is withdrawn, the mind is withdrawn. Because the mind is withdrawn, all the sense faculties follow the mind and imitate the mind. When the mind is withdrawn, the sense faculties are also withdrawn. Here, it is talking about a very technical thing also. It is not simply the mind that, the vague thinking. How can I withdraw the mind without withdrawing the senses? How can I withdraw the senses without withdrawing the mind? Then there is another discussion. How to control the mind? With the mind should I control the prana, or with the prana should I control the mind? There is a huge discussion in one Upanishad. And then they conclude that the mind can be controlled only by pranayama. That is why they say pranayama in Bhajagovindam. Sri Shankaracharya says pranayama pratyaharam nityanitya viveka vicharam. Pranayama pratyaharam, then dharana dhyana samadhi in Yoga Sutra. Meditation comes after the withdrawal of the senses, which is preceded by pranayama. Pranayama helps you to bring back the senses because it comes down the mind. Pranayama deals with the mind, which in turn automatically switches off the senses. So the mind is superior to the senses. The kind of concentration that we experience using pranayama is because the prana brings back the mind, and because the mind is brought back, the sense faculties switch off from their objects. And then they also come back. The sense cravings come back. That is why, for example, when you are very restless, jittery and you are restless, you want to do something, you are pushed to do something. All you need to do is just sit. Exhale completely. Hold the breath outside. Pull your perineum up, Mulabandha. And focus on the heart, or on the epicenter, or on top of the head for a few seconds. And then inhale, hold the breath, and gradually exhale and relax. When you do this 3 times, no matter how restless you are, immediately that rush comes down. The moment the rush comes down, you will see some kind of a tendency in the background. Then you can think around that situation. This is a technique given by Patanjali. Prachyantana vidharanabhyam va pranasya. By throwing out the prana and controlling the prana movement, one can bring down the restlessness of the mind and arrive immediately at a certain level of steadiness. How this works? Because mind is superior to the sense faculties, and the mind is controlled by prana. Prana cannot be controlled by mind directly. Mind can be controlled by prana much easier than prana being controlled by the mind. Okay. So to control the higher prana, you can use the mind and the buddhi. So that comes in the later stage, where you are already controlled in the mind. Then with the controlled mind, you can further direct the prana. But till then, in the beginning stages, the mind has to be controlled by pranayama. That is why when we do japa, we always do the nadi shuddhi before starting the japa. We do this 3 times sipping the water, shuklam pradhanam and all that, and then we do this nadi shuddhi. That is because prana control is very, very important to begin mind control. And when the mind is controlled through pranayama, automatically the sense faculties are controlled, because mind is higher than the sense faculties. Is it enough to just have concentration? Not enough. Those who practice concentration, after some time, when they had a phenomenal, very good meditation experience, I was in Brahmaloka, I was with the Lord, they say in meditation. Next day, they are in the opposite of the Lord. Why? They are so sucked into all this dirty things of life. The very next day they are depressed. Why? Because The buddhi is not a thing. Simply practicing concentration of the mind, maintaining a certain consciousness, they say, no, this is a very popular mistake what people do in this common approach to spiritual things is this experience-oriented spiritual practice. You see all these experience-oriented spiritual practice, what they will do is to try to maintain a certain state of mind. You do some techniques and whatever and then you feel good. It's like a drug, you like that state of mind. That becomes another indulgence that does not solve the problem of samsara. That is why any school that insists on having more and more experiences is counterproductive. It is not even helpful. It is counterproductive. You are sucked into an experience and because you want to maintain that experience, you will be creating trouble for yourself and others. That experience becomes yet another problem to solve. Already I have other problems which I wanted to solve through spiritual practice, but the spiritual practice becomes its own problem. So I have 10 problems plus extra problem called spiritual problem. That comes because the mind is looking for experience. When the mind is looking for experience, I am not dealing with the buddhi. I am trying to maintain the manas in a certain way. Maintaining the manas in a certain way alone will not solve the problem because the thinking pattern that is activating the mind in a certain way towards a certain situation of desire, that pattern of thinking has not transformed. That is why those who only do a lot of control and very impressive control, they may not be free inside and they can get into trouble anytime unless the buddhi is handled. That is why the Lord says, may you overcome all this by understanding that which is higher than the buddhi, which is me. So self-knowledge takes care of all the problem in the buddhi. Why all the problem in the buddhi, which is sustaining the desired patterns? Because of ignorance of what I am. If I know what I am, in the light of the self-knowledge, every other possibility in your intellect to think that I am satisfied only if the desire is satisfied. I am okay only if the desire is satisfied. I am okay only when I take revenge, anger. All the Chinese movies you see only is revenge. Somebody gets, father or grandfather gets killed, that fellow comes all the way from Japan to America to kill somebody, and there is some martial arts. Every Chinese movie is like this. It's revenge. I will be okay only when I take revenge. That thinking comes because I am already lost into that sense of being an experiencer of a certain problem. I will be okay only when I go and get that thing. I am not able to get that. I am a failure. All those people are successful people who are able to satisfy the desire. Those who are able to buy a Mini Cooper are very successful. Those who are not able to buy a Mini Cooper, who are having only some Dacia, they are failures. Those who are going in public transport are even more failures. Why this problem comes? Because self-definition comes from the ability to satisfy desire. So the self-definition will change. When the self-definition undergoes a transformation, because of the vision of what I am really, then the buddhi is not available to encourage the desired patterns. Desire loses its fuel. And all you need is a good lifestyle and then the mind clears automatically. So now, knowledge is obscured by this persistent enemy of the man of knowledge. The man of knowledge already knows I have been flung into this trouble by this craving. So he always suffers. It's a very good point. It's about, the desire is an eternal enemy of a man of knowledge. A person of wisdom. For a person of wisdom, desire is an eternal enemy. You have a beautiful Patanjali Yoga Sutra, remember. Parinama stapa samskara dukkhe gunivritti virodascha dukkhameva sarvam vivekinaha. For a person with discrimination, every desire, every undertaking is pain. Every desire is having the seed of pain. Even the desire to see the God, one's own Ishtadevata, to have a desire to be close to one's own Ishtadevata is also considered as pain after a certain stage. Asa Yaramingal, Ishanodayam, Asa Yaramingal. We had a lady Siddha, a great female yogi in South India called Abhaya. So she says, even cut the desire, even with God, cut the desire. He used to say that. I heard that it seems once Saint Francis of Assisi used to say that. Get rid of desire, even with God, don't have desire. Renounce God also, renounce everything, renounce even God. That he has said once. I heard from one person. So this desire is a pattern. So for a wise person, this desire is an eternal enemy because he sees that it puts me into activity and samsara and bondage. That sense of bondage is sustained by the patterns of desire. The same point comes in Patanjali Yoga Sutra also. Thus, it is a persistent foe or enemy of the knower and not of the ignorant. The ignorant people in the grip of craving indeed may look upon it as a friend initially. Those who are ignorant, they may not recognize that the desire is the problem. Because that is why people are very happy to pursue the desire. While a wise person is very depressed that he has to pursue the desire. The person feels, it's like, it comes like a grip in your heart. When you suddenly realize that I desire something. Like you cannot even say that, I want, I really want that chocolate muffin. I really want. It's like, somebody catches your throat and it's you feel like a worm inside. Because that, that desire puts you, that mind so clearly sees that when you encourage the desire, it brings you trouble. No matter what desire is. I want cannot come. When I want, for me, when that comes, anything centered on I, that for me, when it comes in the mind, you feel like, you have 100 cockroaches going in your system. So immediately you get rid of that pattern. So that it is like a certain vasana of jnana. Whenever you have that vasana of viveka very strong, it will not allow a moment of ability to sustain a personal desire. It's just impossible. That is why it is an constant enemy of the wise. But for the ignorant people, it seems to give them something. So they like it very much. So they are pursuing their desires. That's how the world is running. And when its effect, pain overtakes the person, he realizes, I have been made to suffer through craving. Why did I get into this trouble? Because I wanted to do that. That is why I am in trouble now. Because I wanted to do so much. When I wanted to do, I was so happy to do that. Oh, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that. Priya, Moda, Pramoda, this, Pramod. What is Pramod? Pramod comes because of Mod. Mod comes because of Priya. Liking, thinking about the object gives you a delight. Then, when I am getting closer and closer to that object, that delight is even more. When I obtain that object, is the highest sadhana. It's Pramoda. Priya, Moda, in our Anandamaya Kosha, the experiencer, what is called as the bliss sheet, your pure self. It's like a little diamond inside your heart. And then it's covered by 5 layers of koshas. You heard about that thing? The Anandamaya Kosha. First is the Annamaya Kosha, physical sheet, covers the Atma. Then pranic body covers the Atma. Then the mental body, then the intellectual body, then the body of bliss. So this body of bliss has this thing. Priya, Moda and Pramoda. Good. I am very happy that most of you are laughing because that means your Tattva Bodha is still operating in your head. It is not like this, I am joking. See, this is a body of bliss means it is a certain conditioning. There are 5 levels of conditioning where your sense of self is limited. So I am the experiencer. What is this Anandamaya Kosha made of? Every time when I experience the result of my desire, object of my desire, how will I experience an object of my desire? Whenever my punya manifests. Every time I may have an enjoyment, some punya in the past allows me to have an enjoyment. So when the result of my past good karma manifests, I have a sense of delight. That delight is because of Anandamaya Kosha. And because this Anandamaya Kosha is responsible for this happiness. The Anandamaya Kosha is responsible for this object-centered happiness. So it is called as Priyadi Vritti Sahitam. Priyadi means Priya, Moda, Pramoda. All these different kinds of categories of object-oriented happiness is centered on this Anandamaya Kosha. What is this Anandamaya Kosha made of? Ignorance. Very good. Ignorance. Avidya. Malinas, avidya sahita malinasatvam. Impure, a kind of impurity in the mind that sustains this avidya. That is sustained by avidya, mutually sustaining. Avidya promotes impurity, impurity promotes avidya. So this avidya is what is Anandamaya Kosha. It is the ignorance that makes you happy based on an object. Every time you think you are going to be happy because of ... that because of ... I will be happy is because you don't know what you are. If you know what you are, even in your dream you cannot think that I will be happy if I get that. That if that follows happiness will not be there. Happiness, I am happiness over. It is not a conditioned happiness. When happiness is followed by a condition supply, that means happiness star condition supply, if it is there, that means ignorance is there. That is why an ignorant person may not think that it is good, it is bad for the person, but later when pain follows, how pain follows? When my object of desire is not there, I work for something so hard and I am not able to get it, I am frustrated. Why am I frustrated? Because I tried for it. Why was I trying and craving so much for it? Because I am driven by craving. Because of my craving, because I desired that at that point of time, now I am suffering. Because I wanted a Land Rover 5 years back, now in 4 years when I am enjoying the Land Rover in the right time, I am not able to pay the dues. So because of that, somebody came and took my Land Rover. Now I feel like a failure. If I had not gotten the Land Rover, I would have been so successful going in the public transport. No? So this is our Romanian problem. We want to buy a house and a car. Big house, big car. Big trouble later. The way they are like this, then later they suffer because, I wanted this so much, that's why I am in trouble. What to do? We are all driven by this. This is the ignorant person. Ignorant person says like this. So it is the persistent foe of the knower alone, and it is not a persistent foe for the person who is driven by desire and who is ignorant. It is hard to satisfy, being the fire that nothing can quench. The senses, mind and the desire in the intellect are said to be the abode of the craving. By means of those abodes obscuring knowledge, this enemy deludes the embodied spirit in manifold ways. The sense of individuality, it feels embodied. Okay. Etaihi indriyadihi ashraihi vimohayati vividham mohayati yeshaha kamaha jnanam avritya achadhya dehinam sharirinam. The desire binds the individual by obscuring the knowledge which misdirects the mind, which sustains the craving of the senses, which keeps the patterns alive. The misdirected mind, which is misdirected because of the knowledge that is obscured. Wrong knowledge, misdirected mind, active senses. This is the story of the desire, which brings a person into trouble. Therefore, controlling the senses, O mighty prince, give up this wicked craving, this foe who destroys the knowledge won from the Shastras and the teacher, and also specific realization. These two lead to the supreme well-being. This is the idea. First, controlling the senses, give up this wicked craving that destroys knowledge and desires. So, the insistence, the importance is given to controlling the senses. So, if we want to handle the desire, first we have to provide ourselves conditions where we are not giving sensory excitement. We are making ourselves free from the objects of temptation. Don't keep the objects of temptation around and then work with your desire. Then there will be somebody who will say, I will keep all the temptations around and then I will meditate on how I am. My mind is running behind the objects. That is also actually the controlling, because the person has decided, I will not indulge. He is only working with how the senses are rushing. So this kind of things, the so-called tantric way of dealing with the desire, it will work after a certain level of mastery is attained. So when a person is able to operate at the level of the buddhi, when after you get a certain level of concentration, absorption and all that, at that time you will be able to put yourself in a condition where the sense faculties are given excitement, but the mind is not moved. That is okay. That is kind of improving the nishtha, rehabituating the sense faculties. That is also a kind of practice, but that is not what is meant here. Here what is meant is, that is also actually sense control. Sense control is very important. It means, if the object of desire is not present, okay, if you can provide yourself an environment that is not exciting. If you happen to bump into an environment which is exciting some of your cravings, don't go by the craving, don't act on it. First, dama, control your senses with damyata. Damyata means tasmat tvam indriyanyado niyamya. Niyamya means regulating the sense organs, regulating the sense faculties means at the level of action. It's called indriya odukam. At the level of action, at the level of sensory indulgence, let there be regulation. Niyamya. Niyamya means according to the prescribed method, may you keep your sense faculties busy doing the right thing. And may you do not allow the sense faculty to do what is reinforcing the desired pattern. Niyamya means according to the method, means according to a proper method, means regulate the activity of the five senses of action, the five organs of action and the five organs of perception. Let them be regulated according to a certain method so that they don't provide fuel for satisfying the desire. That is what is told here. And then overcome this patterns of desire. How will you overcome the desire? See, I have controlled my senses, I have regulated my sense faculties, and now you say after regulating the sense faculties according to the proper method, overcome the desire. How will I overcome the desire? Now comes this. More powerful than the senses are the mind, and more powerful than the mind is the intellect, and even higher than the intellect is the self. Okay? So, knowing that which is nobler than the intellect, restraining the senses through the self, Almighty Name. Here it means, the commentary says, this is the main point of how to approach the overcoming of desire. In relation to the gross and finite external body, the senses are considered to be higher than, because they are subtle, internal and wider in scope. Similarly, mind being imaginative and analytic is higher than the senses and finer than the senses. In the same way, the intellect whose essence is knowledge and discrimination is higher than the mind. Finally, the self who is inner to every object and the instrument of perception up to the intellect, whom the craving resorting to these instruments, the senses, etc., deludes by obscuring the knowledge, he is higher than even the intellect. Thus, the beholder of the intellect is the Supreme Self. The one who is the witness, I know, I don't know. I am aware that I know, I am aware that I don't know. The Drishya Viveka. I am not the body, I am aware of the body. Sense faculties, the sense faculties are aware of the body. Mind is aware of the sense faculties. The thinking faculty, the buddhi, is aware of the mind. I recognize I am disturbed, I am calm. That which recognizes the state of the mind is the buddhi. You recognize that you are able to recognize. That is the witness of the buddhi. The witness of the buddhi is who? You. So you are the witness of the intellect which is able to objectify the mind, which is able to objectify the sense faculties, which are able to objectify the body. So you are the subtlest thing of all those things that is there in a person. You are the subtlest, higher than the intellect also. So, thus knowing the self beyond the intellect and controlling the inner sense by means of purifying mind. Evam buddhehe param atmanam buddhva jnatva samstabhya samyak stambhanam krutva atmanam svenaiva atmana samskritena manasa samyak samadhaya ityartha. By knowing the true nature of oneself, that is beyond the intellect, means know the true nature of you who are the witness to the intellect. What is the real nature of this witness? This you, the real you, who is the witness to the intellect also. What is your real nature? That you need to understand. How you will understand? From the teaching. From the teaching, knowing the true nature of yourself as Satchidananda and controlling the inner sense by the means of purified mind, by properly concentrating it, by the practice of yoga, you purify the mind. Destroy the enemy craving that is so hard to reach, for it assumes numerous forms that are scarcely intelligible. Or overcoming the enemy of desire. The enemy who is very difficult to understand, this enemy of desire, which is centered on personal gain and centered on avoiding personal trouble. This personal ego-centered desire, which is born of Rajoguna, is overcome by first self-knowledge, then practice of concentration, and following a way of life and restricting the indulgences of the sense faculties. So, when self-knowledge is combined with the practice of yoga and the proper way of life, when all these three things go together, one will be able to overcome the enemy of desire. Thus, one is also able to overcome the enemy of anger. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu, sarve janaha sukhino